This is going to be a pretty complicated briefing, and I just want to make sure I clarify something in advance. We have two unique individual aspects of the organization I'm going to be speaking to, or issues I'm going to be speaking to. And although they are sole and separate, and I'm going to do my best to keep them in their spaces, there is an overlapping issue. And that's the reason I'm bringing them to you collectively as opposed to independently. So I really need, and I don't mean this to sound disrespectful, they say the devil's in the details. There are a lot of details. And I need you to really dig in to make sure that you're clear on those details so that when you report this to the community, they have a clear understanding, because it is not going to be, it's not going to be easy. And it's not going to be simple. But let me just start by saying, as the sheriff, I will demand that every aspect of this organization is done professionally and ethically, and that we are accountable to everything. And there is no greater responsibility, though all of our responsibilities are very important and serious, there is no greater responsibility than for us to be a disciplined organization as it relates to the acquisition, retention, distribution, and use of firearms. The fact that we engage in decisions on a daily basis that involve deadly force, and that we are training and distributing firearms to our employees, and by extension even to civilian members, volunteers in the organization, is a critical responsibility. I demand that we are highly accountable, and the community deserves nothing less. So it is no secret, the first part of this briefing today is going to involve a recent audit that is still ongoing, but this audit was conducted on the heels of the shooting a few months ago, where we know that two weapons were recovered that were fully automatic, one of which that was not recorded from a previous audit. So let me extend my gratitude first to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and their exceptional employees who played a critical part in leading us and working with us through this audit pertaining specifically to fully automatic firearms. And it wasn't just their expertise or their effort that was critical, but because the record keeping in this organization from previous administrations was so poor that we did not have enough data to actually account for our own weapons to determine what was missing. But because ATF does have all those records for all fully automatic weapons that are acquired, we were able to get more accurate information. So in the original audit, and again, there's going to be a lot of numbers, I'm going to do my best to stay on track. And if there are errors, we'll be sure to clear those up. But in the original audit, we had 15 fully automatic weapons that were already registered in NCIC as either missing or stolen. That is prior to the incident that I was speaking of. That is from an audit that took place prior to taking this administration, but the report was delivered shortly thereafter. In this most recent audit, which has taken some time, we have identified an additional 14 fully automatic weapons that were not accounted for, that were missing from this organization, and were overlooked or just frankly directly missed in the previous audit by the previous administration. So we know that there are approximately, I say approximately because we believe that we have a few that are now located but not taken yet from that number. We have 29 fully automatic weapons that were acquired by the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office that are either missing or stolen. Additionally, there are 20 short barrel shotguns, which are also weapons that require tax stamps from the ATF in order for any individual or agency to possess those. And we have one short barrel rifle. The time frame of acquisition of these firearms originated all the way back to 1959, was the oldest one. And the most recent acquisition of any of these firearms was 2006. So those are the windows of when these weapons became the property of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. So in summary, there are 29 fully automatic weapons that are either missing or stolen from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, 20 short barrel shotguns, and one short barreled rifle. Thus far into the audit, there has not been a single indication to show that any of those weapons have gone missing from this organization since I've taken office. They all occurred prior to my arrival. What I have done to ensure that we are responsible and accountable, as I told you in the past, we changed policies, but due to recognizing how egregious the circumstance is, annually, every member of the organization, whether they are an employee or a civilian volunteer with authority of law enforcement, annually will bring either their county-issued weapon or weapons, as well as their own privately owned, but weapons that they use during the course of their duties, to their qualification, where they will be photographed, the serial number will be photographed, the ID of the individual who possesses those weapons will be photographed, and they will all be kept in a database. This is as aggressive a step as I can think of to ensure that every individual in this organization is responsible to recognize that the property of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office is the property of Maricopa County residents. And we have to be responsible and accountable to those. And any weapon that you are using as a member of this organization in any capacity must be accounted for. We are continuing the audit of all weapons in the organization. We are also working hand in hand with our federal partners to ensure that any of these weapons that may have information that could lead us to the individuals who are in possession of them, or if any criminal activity took place, that it will be handled appropriately. Today, we will be sending out correspondences to about 7,300 current and former employees, to include any civilian volunteers who are part of this organization currently or in the past that may have knowledge of or possession of any of these weapons in hand. That letter is originating from the ATF. It will give a 30-day window, and you'll be able to get a copy of it for individuals to have the opportunity to return those weapons if they were acquired in some manner not believed to be criminal intent. We don't know the practices of the past. We don't know if some of these weapons were given as gifts or how they were acquired or how they left this organization. But at the end of the day, we need to get them all back. And we cannot allow for them to end up in the hands of people who wish to do harm to our community like occurred in that incident. Give me just a moment to review some of the details here to make sure I'm covering everything. As it stands right now, as it relates to fully automatic weapons within the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, there are 3 primary units that are still in possession of a small number of fully automatic weapons, and they are the most highly qualified, highly trained members of the organization who are part of our fugitive apprehension team, our Special Investigations Division, and our SWAT team. So a very select number and very few number of individuals within the organization have the authority, the training, and the permission to possess and utilize fully automatic weapons during the course of their duties. All the other weapons have been taken out of the hands of individuals out in the field who may have possessed them, and they are now in our property room, and I'll make a determination going forward as to what we'll do with those weapons. But it will only be in the circumstances of those most highly qualified, highly trained, and highly responsible to possess the weapons that are this sophisticated in nature. Told you about our ongoing audits and what our efforts are regarding being a more responsible organization, but I said it before and I will say it again, this is unacceptable. It is unacceptable for any law enforcement agency to be this negligent, to not keep accurate records, and to allow for weapons to be distributed in a manner that doesn't even have any oversight or accountability, and for those weapons to eventually leave this organization, because not only are they the property of the community who has empowered us and funded us to acquire these weapons, but they are the responsibility of the organization to make sure that they are lawfully used and that they are the property of those who are intended to possess them. I know you're going to have questions. I'm going to ask you to hold on to those, because the next area of this briefing is going to be more complicated than what I just spoke of, and I would prefer to hold questions till the end if everybody's okay with that. In addition to this audit, I have spoken some time ago about ensuring that every member of the organization meets a standard that is acceptable and deserving of the privilege of law enforcement. We have a high volume of civilian volunteers who support the efforts of law enforcement within this organization through the posse. And the majority of those men and women are exceptional people deserving of that authority. But the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, in its practices of the past, failed those individuals greatly also. And because of those failures, I have to take steps to address them. And I will start by giving you the example, and then I will make the statement regarding this. But we have what's called a QAP, a Qualified Armed Posse. These are volunteers who are members of the posse who are certified, or at least given a certification, to also be armed during the course of their responsibilities as volunteers within the organization. The number that we believe is accurate, because it fluctuates, is 235 members of the QAP. So these are 235 volunteer members who are part of the Qualified Armed Posse. We have 6 requirements to be a member of QAP: a background check, a personal history interview, a polygraph, a psychological exam, a urinalysis, and then a qualification with the firearm. Of the 235 members who are currently certified as QAP, only 4 have passed, or I shouldn't say passed, have taken every stage of that process, have gone through all 6 stages to receive certification. That does not mean that the balance cannot pass or are not deserving. That means that this organization failed those members because we did not run them through the entire process before giving them certification. When I say the organization, again, there was a push to increase the volume of that posse by the prior administration, in my opinion, for the perception of showing some expansion of law enforcement force, which I really think was more so politically motivated. And in the haste to do so, we have a lot of men and women who were given this privilege, and not that they're not deserving, but there was no standard that was kept to ensure that they'd all gone through that process. So this is absolutely a failure on behalf of the organization and not those individuals. But because of those circumstances, I am forced to temporarily suspend the enforcement operations of the posse program. This is specific to those members who are involved in actions that are enforcement related. We have many other posse members, our search and rescue, our memorial fund, others who are not involved in enforcement. It will not be impacting them. And this temporary suspension does not mean that those individuals are not appreciated and will not have an opportunity to complete the process to see that they have passed each stage and can continue on in that capacity. But I cannot and will not, in good conscience, allow for this organization to have standards that meet the expectations of our community of what it would mean to be given this authority and the privilege of being in law enforcement carrying a weapon if we are not delivering and holding to those standards. The review of the QAP is what led me to recognize that even for some of those individuals, they're not QAP. They may be working in enforcement activities but don't carry a firearm or are a part of that posse. But until we can do a thorough audit and until we can incorporate all those individuals through this process so that we can ensure they meet the standards, I can't allow for this to continue until we've done our due diligence. And again, I apologize to the posse members because it is not their shortcomings or anything on their, that anything is their fault. It is the fault of the disorganization, the lack of standards and commitment to excellence by the organization historically. And under my direction, it's not going to continue. They will be receiving correspondences also. So for those who have met the qualifications, they can continue on. For the others, we are going to be expeditious. It is my hope that within 60 days that any individuals who wish to continue that have not completed the process, that we will get them through the process to make that determination. But I will tell you that there were examples of individuals that were given the privileges and in the audit were not deserving. Yet the previous administration overlooked that and allowed for it to continue, and I can't. So I want to close by repeating what I just said, and then I'm happy to get to your questions, but the reason I incorporated these 2 elements is because they all tie to one critical piece. We must be an organization of high integrity and ethics in everything that we do. So if it is the possession or the acquisition of firearms and how we account for those and how we distribute those and train for them, we will meet the highest standards. If it is the blessing of having volunteers who wish to come work with us and deliver public safety to expand our reach and increase the volume of our force, it's greatly appreciated. But no different than men and women who go through the academy to get these privileges, to the posse members who wish to make that sacrifice, we will have a standard and the standard will be held. Again, my apologies to the posse members for what is going to be an inconvenience, and I know that this will absolutely affect the volume of those members who wish to continue or are entitled to continue. And it will absolutely affect our ability to meet the needs of the community, because we are already an organization that is depleted in resources. But I cannot weigh one against the other and say that it's okay to continue not having the highest standard for law enforcement. So with that, I turn it over to you for your questions. And you know what, I'm going to ask one thing, because I know that we get into this habit where people start yelling them out. Just please raise your hand and we'll be respectful to everybody. Steve?
Why should posse members who aren't trained and sworn in the same way as your deputies have weapons like this in the first place?
They shouldn't, Steve. We should absolutely have a standard that if you have full enforcement authority and the right to enforce the laws and be armed, that no different than reserve members who have to be post-certified or our deputies, we are going to set standards that require that they are deserving and qualified. There should not be a shortened threshold for those that are just volunteers. So in this audit, we are going to be also enhancing certain aspects of it to ensure that everybody who represents this patch and this badge is deserving to do so, no different than men and women who go through a 24, 28-week course. I'm not saying it would be the same exact equivalent, but whether they're reserve status or certified through post, there will be a process to be able to accomplish that.
Just to go through the real simple basics here, you covered a lot.
I wish it was that simple and basic, but
Right.
I appreciate you.
So, 2 audits, one's posse, one's guns, right? So we have that. When it comes to the guns, you listed 50 weapons, right? The 29 fully automatic weapons, I think 20 short barrel shotguns, 1 short barrel rifle, so that's 50. So in the past administrations, are there more firearms other than those that likely or did go missing that you just don't have documentation for, like handguns or other types of weapons?
It's an exceptional question. Our audit continues exactly for that reason. It is not uncommon for individuals that are members of the community, any different than law enforcement professionals, to be victims of crime, whether it's vehicle burglaries, home burglaries, and weapons go missing. We expect that those are always reported. We are doing our audit continues, and we are doing a full audit of all firearms. So that would mean handguns and others that have not fallen into the specifications I'm speaking of. So I had to take some folks out of their primary responsibilities, and they have been working diligently with the ATF and independently to audit every firearm in this organization.
So those 50 were like ATF registered type of guns that you could track. So I mean, theoretically, officers do, I don't want to say often, but this is something I've been looking into the last several weeks, and many agencies, they lose firearms and burglaries of their homes or their vehicles, things like that. So it's likely that there are many more weapons that this agency doesn't have accounted for outside of those 50.
It's worse than that. Okay, I will tell you that there was a practice that is, I've been in this office for 2 years now, and I wish that we could have addressed these more quickly and more expeditiously. But with all the responsibilities that are going on, we're taking it as diligently as we can, expeditiously as we can. But it's been brought to my attention that there were even practices in the past that some seized weapons that were then put into service so that deputies would have other firearms was part of the practice with little or no oversight. So we don't know what we don't know. We were fortunate with ATF, they had records that assisted us. There will likely be, at the conclusion of this audit, weapons that have left this organization with no ability to identify or track them, to know why or where, who or how.
So even if you come up with another number beyond this 50 in this audit, you believe it's more than likely that there are going to be many more that you didn't even realize have ever gone missing from this agency in the past?
That is a fair statement.
Okay. So then, does this audit continue up into today, like any that would be missing up into today?
Absolutely.
But you're confident there are no fully automatic or the weapons that you described that have gone missing since your administration began?
I think it would be safer to say that I am hopeful.
Okay,
Because obviously at the inception of this audit, I spoke before about the previous audit, and they say don't assume. Made the assumption that audit that occurred just before I took the office was accurate. It turned out not to be. And if not for a horrific incident, probably wouldn't have been brought to our attention. Unfortunately, that's how things often occur. Something stimulates, you recognize there's an issue, you have to address the issue. But I can assure you that going forward, the level of our accountability, the changes in our policy and our practices will do a considerable amount to diminish the possibility of this being a systemic problem. Doesn't mean that that it could never occur again, though. That would be naive.
So what's your target date for completing the audit? Is it weeks, months, year?
No, I mean, I wish I could give you a target date, and I know how hard they're working with it. You know, it is my hope that, 90 days. But that's, I'll be frank with you, I'm throwing out a random time frame because I don't know the complexities. And what ends up happening is during this audit, all of a sudden they'll turn over information that was available where we find something that we didn't know existed and it leads us into another direction. So we're gonna continue to prioritize it, but herein lies the challenge. Every time I take resources from a space and dedicate them to a new responsibility, it takes us away from our core responsibility, which is public safety, and that's a shame. Because we have to stay on top of these issues for the behalf of the community. I'll come back to you, but let me just get around the room.
Quick clarification, you said there was a policy of using seized weapons. You mean weapons seized that were used in crimes were given to officers?
Once forfeited, yes.
Okay, and then the other question, you said the posse members were not given all of these qualifications. Was there one specific part that they kept failing? Or
not taking
all of them?
Yeah, I don't want to make it sound like they failed them because that's there were some circumstances where people were given the authority and should not have been. But the greater percentage was just in, I can't speculate, but let's just say this. There was such a fluid and abrupt process to get people onto the posse that the organization did not take the time to process them thoroughly. So there's no one particular category. It is a mixed bag of the 6 items that I articulated, where some have missed a few, some have missed many.
As far as the shotgun audit, does that include the situation with Lieutenant Osmay, pronunciation, and if so, what's his situation now?
I know which one you're referencing, and you're speaking of the deputy who was charged with the possession of the stolen shotgun. That is one of the shotguns that was taken, unlawfully, but it's a whole separate and unique element to it. I will tell you this though, you've seen it in previous cases. If you are committing a crime, you will be held accountable. I don't care who you are or what your profession is or you're part of this organization. So if it turns out that during the course of this, any leads or information come forward that show us that individuals were removing these weapons knowing that it was unlawful and they have no alibi for how they came to possession of them, they will be prosecuted if that's the case. Our number one intent though, and I want to be respectful to our partners at ATF who are working diligently, is to get these weapons off the street, period. Do you want to come back to you since nobody else is jumping in?
A couple more. Those are good questions. So when it comes to you've given these 50, but when we're talking about how many you may know of right now that we haven't discussed, even though the audit continues, are we talking about there are dozens more that you know of that have gone missing, other types of firearms? Do you have any sort of even rough number at this point in addition to the 50 documented through ATF?
I don't, and I would tell you that it would be irresponsible for me to speculate with that, because no different than the number I just gave you. We know there's 3 or 4 that we believe we have recovered. We just have not removed them from the list yet, because what I don't want to do is give you a lower number and it turns out higher. But it goes beyond. It's not just firearms. We're looking at other items. We're actually either in the process of or just recently purchased software. We're trying to acquire software so that we can inventory every singular item that is a county item that is in the possession of this organization, and then tie those items to every individual who is a member of this organization. Because again, these are things that were non-existent or were done so poorly that we do not have a detailed and thorough database that incorporates all the pieces of property. So we talk about firearms because they're the most high profile and dangerous. But every item in this organization that is issued is a piece of property from Maricopa County Sheriff's Office and the county itself, so we have to account for all of them, but I can't speculate to where we're going to end up.
Something you just said, just maybe thinking it. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but I mean, I think a month ago I requested from many agencies all their missing or unaccounted for firearms, right? So and as for a database or inventory list, so you're saying based on what you said, that's not even something this agency really had prior to.
That's a fair statement, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Steve, I think you were...
Yeah, you came here from the Phoenix Police. When you compare their regime for making sure that all the weapons are accounted for to what you found here at this office from Sheriff Arpaio's administration?
Former Sheriff Arpaio, yeah, thankfully. It was rude of me, I apologize. But I'm just frustrated to think that the good men and women of this organization, good men and women of the posse, are now under a microscope due to the bad practices of a smaller percentage, and that's a shame because their sacrifices and their work for this community are extremely important and need to be appreciated. And when a light like this ends up diminishing, or excuse me, a cloud like this diminishes that light, it's shameful. So I don't want to compare the two, and I'll tell you why. I will speak to just some basics. There were fundamental things that were just inherently part of the organization. You know, I came in under a chief named Ruben Ortega, who's a friend, and I mean, I respect greatly, and his commitment to discipline and oversight was, you were under a microscope, and that's how you were born and bred. So, you know, practices of accountability were not out of the ordinary. They were the expectation, and I think for the majority of the men and women in this organization, they embrace that mentality. But when leadership fails them dramatically and practices go on like those that have gone on in the past here, it tears away from the fabric of integrity for those who do it the right way. So there's absolutely a contrast, but the contrast is not reflective of the men and women. The contrast is reflective of the leadership within the organization. You know, no different than Dennis Garrett, who was my chief, and Harold Hurt and Jack Harris. You know, they all had similar philosophy that this is a privilege. This is not an entitlement. If you were in law enforcement, you're given great authority, and it is based in the fact that the community trusts that you are a good steward of that authority. And if you are not, and you fail to do so, then you don't deserve the privilege.
The 50 firearms that are missing, are those weapons that were acquired through private vendors or the 1033 program?
These I don't believe are well, you know, let me get you clarification on that, because I know with some of them when they were DOD acquired or wherever they were returned, so the how this bag falls relative to how they were acquired, I want to make sure that I'm 100% accurate, and I believe these were all private acquisitions and all the DOD ones were returned, but don't quote me on that until we can get you the answer. I apologize. I'm sure they briefed me on it, but as you can tell, there's a lot of details here.
Is a suspension of that aspect of the posse going to affect the on-the-street deputies and their daily patrols? Are they going to have to supplement where the posse would otherwise be?
Absolutely. It's not, you know, we sat upstairs talking this through, and I knew where I stood on it, but I wanted to hear from my executive team, because this will absolutely impact the workforce on the street, and it will diminish the good work that's done by many of our posse members temporarily. But quite frankly, yes, we are an organization that is short on staff like many others, and now our supplemental workforce is being temporarily suspended. So that affects our ability to provide public safety, and that is my #1 priority, but I have to do it the right way, and that means we're going to have to take appropriate steps. I'll take one or two more, then I'm going to conclude, but I do appreciate the patience of everybody, and I'll come right back to you, Steve.
The semi-autos that were removed from the field and put in...
Fully autos.
Oh, fully, that were
Correct.
put in weapon storage, roughly, rough number?
I don't have that, I apologize, we'll get that for you though. Yeah.
Can you explain in layperson's terms what specifically was done so sloppily under the previous administration so that this situation could happen? Were they failing to, you know, were they writing stuff down on paper and not filing it properly? Were they unable to enter things in the computer? Were they not taking photos of weapons? Were they losing things? What were they screwing up so badly?
It was probably a mixed bag of many of those things. You know, there's circumstances that we're still looking into where weapons were acquired, and upon acquisition, there was no other records kept on those, and they were just distributed. That if an individual in leadership, particular one, said, "You want one of these guns? Here you go." There was a time when, and some of it was egregious. Some of it was just, it lacked management or sophistication of processes. An example, we've had districts where they kept fully automatic weapons in a safe, and you could just check that weapon out for your shift because there weren't enough to be distributed to all the employees. In doing so, the you know, the accounting of it was nothing more than a ledger. You just, you know, signed in and signed out. So if you didn't sign in or sign out, no one knew who last possessed it. And that's one of our biggest problems is we're not able to identify when a lot of these weapons went missing because there's no record of if they were qualified with. There's no record of who actually possessed or controlled them at any given time. So it is the spectrum. Some of it is just poor execution without bad intent, and some of it is just really bad practices and intent is questionable.
Because the Phoenix Public Library keeps better track of books, what you're telling us, than this office was keeping track of deadly weapons.
That is a good example, Steve. Yeah. Yeah. Your eye roll matches my own, sir. I'm going to conclude this and just tell you I appreciate the patience and the thoughtful questions. This is not easy, but I hope that at this stage in my tenure you realize that I can't prevent everything, nor can the other good men and women in this organization or posse members, but how we respond to it will define our character and our integrity. And as these things reveal themselves, I'm going to take whatever steps are necessary to ensure that everybody who wears this patch and this badge and works in this organization can do so proudly, because they know that the community trusts that we are doing it the right way and we're committed to having a high level of ethics. And this circumstance here will be rectified, but it will take time. And once we rectify it, we'll do everything in our powers to ensure that it does not occur again. Thank you.